Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
All right, welcome everybody. Toker Talk Radio in effect. Glad to have you here. Thanks for being here. And my goodness, that's last story on the rant. You know, I can call him a kid. I'm damn near 50. 21 years old, man. Kills himself. He's busted for weed, then put into an immigration hold. And our wonderful, esteemed, vibrant, and intelligent, and may I say handsome chat room out there, bringing up fantastic points during my presentation there. Jasm in the chat room points out the statistic, and I believe this is true. I don't have the confirmation, but I think I've seen this stat before. 1 out of 4 deportations comes from a marijuana bust, from someone getting caught with weed. I'd love to have the link on that, Jasm, if you've got that out there. But 1 out of 4 from a marijuana bust. And that just goes to show, you know, I talked about how, you know, the very advent of this Trump administration and how Bilbo Bigot, you know, the attorney general, the sling blade hobbit, you know, Keebler Gump, Jeff Sessions, that's his name, how he was going to want to go after weed. And part of this, too, is to see the bigger picture and how all these things tie together and how Trump, as a demagogue, needs to have someone to demagogue against. It's the illegals. You know, every authoritarian dictator type has, you know, the undesirables that we all have to, you know, rally against. And for Trump, that was going to be the illegals. It was going to be the Mexicans. They're coming to take your jobs. Going to build a wall, right? So in order to continue demagoguing, demonizing those people, dig back into the playbook, baby. We're going all the way back to the 1910s. The marijuana, the loco weed that the Mexicans are bringing across the border, it was going to be part and parcel of this whole thing. And that was why Sessions needs to go after weed, needs to have the shackles loosened from him going after weed in the medical marijuana states. Wink, wink, California, wink, Arizona, wink, New Mexico. 3 medical marijuana states right there on the Mexican border. He needed those shackles taken off him so he can go after weed, because by having illegal weed, you can bust the illegals. You got something to get them on. You just see a Mexican guy, brown skin, and say, hey, you know, where's your papers? You know, are you legal? You get you to run aground into some rocky constitutional territory. But, I smell weed. I smell weed there, son. Now you got them for something legitimate. Now you can go down as immigration status and deal with all of that. That's how you round up all the illegals. And I'm sorry, I use that in quotation marks. I shouldn't even say that. But round up these people to put them into the private prison-owned little ICE detention camps that they've got, ICE detention centers. That's the next big market for the private prison industry. You got to have that illegal weed so you can bust them. And hell, if these Mexicans can just go get a medical marijuana card and then Congress forbids us from spending money from going after medical marijuana people, well, then we lose that little tool. That's what this has always been about, folks. It's the tool that unlocks our constitutional protections. The Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, all sorts of protections we have. That's why they need to keep it illegal. It ain't about the weed. It's never been about the weed. Hell, we go back to Ehrlichman's comment from the Nixon administration. It wasn't about the weed. It was to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, then criminalize both heavily. We could demonize them night after night on the evening news, disrupt their meetings, arrest their leaders, overturn their organizations. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And they still are. So kudos to the chat room out there taking care of this. Jasm says he heard that 1 out of 4 from an immigrant rights organization leader who spoke in Albany, New York. By the way, that brings up a good point. On this new platform, this Patreon platform that we're at mjagenda.com, it has a community page. It has a community tab right there at the top where you can submit links, submit stories, submit pictures, submit data. I think you can upload audio. And hell, I would love that. The more help I get building this show, I've always wanted this to be a cannabis community show, that people that are in Vermont or in Michigan or in Florida or Ohio that are working on this could give their boots on the ground focus, could give us the detailed news from the local level that we don't always get filtered up to the national level marijuana reform organizations. That's what this show's all about. First half hour, national stuff. Second half hour, local, regional, and niche stuff. And I'm going to need your help to build this. I mean, I'll fly as much as I can. I'll go to as many places as I can, but it really just depends on how much support we get here at the Marijuana Agenda. If you're not a patron yet, it's cool. I understand times are tough. Money is tight. But if you're out there buying a Starbucks, I know how much those Starbucks cost. Take one of them Starbucks, put it $4.20 a month, $4.20 a month to the Marijuana Agenda on Patreon, mjagenda.com, $4.20 a month. You get 20 plus hours of podcasting and all sorts of cool downloads. Help me out.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
It's time for cannabis facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the UK Cannabis Chronicle from the UK Cannabis Social Clubs. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And in this segment, I'm going to go a little off the warpath. That's what I call it when I talk about stuff other than weed. And this one is going to piss off half of my listeners because there's an intersection between, especially in Texas and some of the more red states in marijuana reform, there's an intersection of marijuana reform advocacy and gun advocacy, Second Amendment support, right? And so anytime I talk about guns, I'm just going to piss off half my listeners. That's fine. because I got to talk about this today. I got to talk about this shooting that happened this morning out in suburbs in Virginia, suburbs of Washington, D.C., where a supporter of Bernie Sanders, a crazed lunatic, left-wing lunatic this time, took a rifle and a pistol and started firing shots out at the baseball field at the congressional congressmen and staffers that were playing ball. And before it happened, one of the congressmen reports that he had spoken to the gunman who had asked, who's out there playing ball? Is it Democrats or Republicans? And he says, well, it's the Republicans. Okay. And then the shooter. So they're looking at this as a politically motivated crime, that this guy was looking to take out Republicans, right? And this is a far left Bernie Sanders hates Trump kind of guy. Now, Bernie Sanders came out and immediately denounced the guy, denounced the violence. And folks, let's just be clear that there's nut jobs everywhere. There's crazy people everywhere on all sides of every issue. So this is just clearly a case of crazy, but there's also a political angle to this. And I want to talk about the politics of this because I'm a chicken farmer now and I got chickens. And there is this old saying about your chickens coming home to roost. And I've just, gotten into getting my chickens into the coop and getting them roosting at night. And it's just a wonderful thing. But there's that old saying, your chickens come home to roost. And it has to do with, what you put out there in the world sometimes comes back to bite you in the ass. So I want to talk about this with respect to what we've heard from Republicans for this entire decade. We've heard a lot of this rhetoric. Let's start with our president, Donald Trump. On the campaign trail in 2016, as he was battling Secretary Hillary Clinton for the presidency, he spoke in, August of 2016. He was speaking at one of his events, and let me get the exact quote here. He was talking about gun rights and how the Supreme Court was important, and if Hillary Clinton was elected, then she gets to pick a Supreme Court judge. And his remark was, quote, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment, people, maybe there is. Okay, so the Second Amendment people, what? So if she gets elected, there's nothing you can do, although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is. And the Trump campaign tried to play this off as saying, well, the Second Amendment people, he means they're voters and they would come out to vote. And so, no, bullshit. The formation of that sentence, the way that logic plays, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks, sets up the phrase that he is speaking about the future in which Hillary Clinton is elected. The only solution then would be the Second Amendment, meaning assassinate the president. So Trump put that kind of shit out there in the political atmosphere, but he wasn't the first to do so. This goes all the way back. Let's retreat all the way back to 2010. Remember Alaska Governor Sarah Palin? Remember Sarah Palin? She tweeted on her social media one of these meme pictures that said, don't retreat, instead reload, and pointing to a list of Obamacare supporting lawmakers. Don't retreat, instead reload. These guys support giving health care to everybody. Let's point guns at them. In 2014, another Republican, Senator Joni Ernst, said she believed in her right to carry guns to defend herself, whether, quote, whether it's from an intruder or whether it's from the government, should they decide that my rights are no longer important, end quote. That's a Republican senator in a campaign saying, I need to, we may need to shoot at officers of our government. We may need to shoot at our elected officials. Sharon Angle, she's the one that came up with the actual phrase that's the operative phrase here. Sharon Angle, she was running for Senate in 2010 in Nevada. Another Republican said, quote, if this Congress keeps going the way it is, people are really looking toward those Second Amendment remedies. We don't like the way Congress is voting on things, so we're going to go get our guns and shoot them. Now, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And again, one of the politicians I do not like at all. But Debbie Wasserman Schultz, when she was running for Congress in 2009, her challenger, the Republican challenger, Robert Lowry, shot at a human-shaped gun range target with Wasserman Schultz initials written on it. Now, this is all built into a mythology that the NRA sells, like hotcakes and pumps into the minds of their supporters, that the reason we need to have this Second Amendment is the government's coming, and if the government's coming, we'll have our guns and we'll fight off the government. That idea that we would use guns to be shooting at our own countrymen who are acting according to the Constitution that we set up is the kind of thinking that leads to this. And it's happening over on the left, too. This shooting today shows it is happening on both fringes of politics. This idea that, well, if things just get tough, if things get a little messy, if we don't quite get our way the way we'd like, that's what the Second Amendment's for, so we can take our guns out and start shooting the politicians. That's what that logic is. Well, we got to have the Second Amendment protected from a tyrannical government. How about voting? How about you get your ass out and vote to protect against a tyrannical government? How about you get your ass out and run for one of these offices to protect yourself from a tyrannical government? Why is it always run to the gun? We're going to just shoot people up. This is seriously causing a breakdown in our society. Over 33,000 people killed by guns every year in this society. Well, cars kill people too. Yeah, but cars at least have a purpose other than killing people. The vast majority of people using cars, the millions and millions using them every day, the millions of man hours where a car isn't killing people is something to consider as well, I would think. I know people get all pissed off at this debate, and I've always got to give the caveat that I've been in the military. I grew up in Idaho. I took hunter education when I was 12. My whole family is hunters, and I will never support any sort of law that would prevent my mom and dad in their 70s from being able to get their elk rifle and go out and hunt elk. Or a guy that needs a shotgun. One of my uncles who likes to hunt birds with shotguns and stuff. I even have cops in my family. I got a couple cousins who were cops, and now I think do private security stuff, and they need to be armed for that. I'm all for that. I'm even for the guys that like to go out, shoot targets, go out in the country and shoot cans. Hell, I like to do that. That's a lot of fun. But we've got to get to the root of stopping the crazy people from getting the guns. I think we can all agree on that. How can we keep the guys who like to take the guns out in public and shoot at our politicians? How can we address that? Can we agree that that's a problem? Can we agree that randomly sprayed bullets in public places is a problem? And it wasn't just, hell, any week in America, you can just look and in the news, and there's plenty of stories to talk about. We had the workplace shooting incident that took place recently as well. Again, we've set up this society where, well, we're frustrated. Well, things aren't going our way. Well, we got nothing to live for. Might as well shoot people. And I'm not here to say let's take guns away. Not here to say that. There's a host of other things we could do that would reduce our gun violence. Number one, have a real social safety net in this country. How about a universal guaranteed income, guaranteed universal health care, guaranteed college education? Give people stuff to live for. Don't let people get to the point where they hit rock bottom and, well, it's rock bottom. What the hell? I might as well take some people with me. That would do so much more to reduce gun violence in this country than any sort of gun law that we would pass. Have an actual social safety net. Problem is, those NRA-backed politicians tend to be the Republicans who tend to block the social safety net that would fix that problem. That would also go for mental health care. And then there are some common sense gun regulations that damn near every gun owner, damn near even every NRA member agrees with. Things like universal background checks. Let's have a universal background check. Let's check to see if you're crazy, you're beating your wife or spouse, or have, some anger control issues. Let's check that kind of stuff out. How about actually computerizing our gun records? Did you know that's illegal? You can't computerize gun records? That they have people sifting through mounds and mounds of paper to try to deal with this in the 21st century? There's so much we could do, and I don't want to see more and more gun violence have to happen before we finally get to some sort of consensus on making some changes in this society, because I'm sick of talking about this.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid.
All right, folks. Well, I think that might be all I can handle of that debate for today. Thank God it's 4:20 here in the Pacific time zone, and I got a fatty. Well, I had a fatty. First, I got to go roll a joint. We'll be right back.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact Normal at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaman Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Veterans of Compassion with the Veterans Cannabis Group. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. Hey, if you're into that politics stuff that I talk about, you can follow me on Twitter at Radical Russ. That's where I talk about all the everything stuff. Everything that's going on with my world at Radical Russ. If you just want the marijuana stuff, follow the show Twitter at MJ Agenda Show. At MJ Agenda Show. Remember, not at MJ Agenda. That's Mustafa Jagenda. There's actually a guy out there named Mustafa Jagenda who's got the MJ Agenda. So it's MJ Agenda Show on Twitter if you want the latest breaking marijuana news. And speaking of breaking marijuana news, hat tip to Tom Angel out at marijuanamoment.net. If you're not getting his daily newsletter free via email, you should get it. It's at marijuanamoment.net. Check that out. He's got reporting on Jeff Sessions and his letter he sent to the congressional leaders asking them to not renew the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment that prevents the Department of Justice from busting people in medical marijuana states. And there's all sorts of pushback from this, from the medical marijuana states, including my senator, Ron Wyden from Oregon, who said, quote, Jeff Sessions is again showing he only values upholding states' rights when he thinks the state is right. Any attempt to waste taxpayer dollars by going after law-abiding citizens would run contrary to the science on marijuana, not to mention basic common sense. Voters in Oregon and other states that have chosen to legalize marijuana should not have their votes thrown in the trash by this administration. It's past time for Congress to stand up to this administration and begin to responsibly address our outdated federal marijuana laws. And the delegation from Maine, the entire delegation, an independent, 2 Republicans and a Democrat, 2 senators, 2 congresspeople. Senator Angus King, the independent, said, quote, Senator King recognized, this is from his staff, Senator King recognized the growing body of evidence suggesting that cannabinoids can be effective in treating a number of conditions, such as epilepsy and cancer. And he is troubled by the administration's recent statements indicating a desire to crack down on states where medical marijuana has been legalized. He believes the federal government should not interfere with state laws on this issue and instead give states the ability to make and implement policy based on the wishes of their citizens. That's Senator Angus King, independent. Senator Susan Collins, Republican, from her staff. As a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Collins has supported amendments to the annual funding bills to prohibit the Department of Justice and Department of Health and Human Services from interfering with state-level medical marijuana programs. Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, a Democrat, quote, marijuana dispensaries throughout Maine have already opened their doors, and the Attorney General's proposal would cost our state thousands in new revenue. The Attorney General's proposal is nonsensical and ignores the fact that current policies on marijuana have been incredibly costly to taxpayers and ruin the lives of thousands of nonviolent offenders. And Congressman Bruce Poliquin, Republican, from his staff, he supports and respects states' rights to determine their own constitutionally sound laws. Congress has acted in bipartisan fashion to support this amendment, and Maine voters have spoken at the state level in support of specific state policy on this matter. So it is a wonderful time to be alive when you've got federal level politicians in office speaking in support of marijuana reform and in opposition to increases in prohibition. This is huge. I've been doing this for a dozen years, and trying to get anyone on the record anywhere close to medical marijuana for years was a difficult, if not impossible, task. Now, we got so many quotes, we can hardly get them all in. It's a beautiful thing. Also in federal news, the U.S. House bill to regulate marijuana like alcohol got one new co-sponsor, bringing the total to 11. U.S. House bill to move marijuana to Schedule 2 and protect state legal medical cannabis activities got its first co-sponsor. I'm dubious of whether or not to be in support of moving marijuana to Schedule 2. It's hard not to, but it's hard to, it's hard to imagine that you don't move it to Schedule 2, that isn't one of the baby steps that takes place. I just worry that Schedule 2 is just going to prolong prohibition. Because once marijuana is in Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, but if it's still on the schedule but legal, it opens the door to the big multinational pharmaceutical companies. It opens the door for the big tobacco companies to come in and dominate the marijuana market. And then they become a very potent advocate for maintaining the status quo. They begin to put corporate marketing muscle behind keeping medical cannabis in Schedule 2. And once it's in Schedule 2, there is now federal impetus to go after state medical marijuana, especially those states that allow their patients to cultivate their own cannabis, because now you got a lobby of GW Pharmaceuticals and Philip Morris and Altria and all these guys lobbying against home grow, want to stop that, and you're going to say, well, that's what leads to black market diversion. And now that it's Schedule 2, the FDA is involved. Now we've got these regulatory agencies involved. One of the weird lessons of legalization is sometimes you find out that you become less free when things are legal because you get tied up in the regulation of everything. I'd really like to see us just drop prohibition. I'd like to see what happened with alcohol to happen to marijuana, to make it so that at one point the federal government prohibited it, and then the federal government just lifted that prohibition. Just said, look, It's not our gig. It's up to the states. Y'all figure out what you want to do with it. I'm trying to imagine the realities that have to happen, the timeline that would have to transpire to get us to a place politically where it would be palatable to the politicians to just drop prohibition, to not inch it into Schedule 2. And you're going to have a lot of people on our side, especially those dealing on the medical aspect, that are going to want to push to Schedule 2 because from their perspective, look, if you get it to Schedule 2 and GW Pharmaceuticals can perfect some of these cannabinoid medicines, and those medicines are covered by insurance and they're more reliable and dose dependent, and they actually have studies showing they work, and you can distribute them in all 50 states, that saves lives. That helps tons and tons of people that wouldn't normally get that help if we just inched along with cultivating your own cannabis and legalizing it. So it would be hard to argue against them to say, well, no, we shouldn't make it Schedule 2, when making it Schedule 2 is going to unlock so much medical potential. So many more studies are going to happen at that point. So it's one of those weird situations, man, where I'm just not. I see a path on Schedule 2 that leads into the medical marijuana box canyon and keeps allowing for the prosecution of home cannabis growers. But I also see a path where we drop prohibition altogether, and that might happen anyway as big companies get involved. Again, once that federal prohibition's dropped, whether it gets down to Schedule 2 or it's just out of the Controlled Substances Act, that opens the floodgates to the big companies getting in. We're kind of in this golden age of marijuana and medical marijuana where every state is its own economy. Interesting side note, that's the way corporations originally were, by the way. Do you know that? In American history, 1800s, the idea of the corporations were put together. They were state chartered. You had to state chartered your corporation in each state, right? You couldn't just be one corporation in all states. That changed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, I believe, railroads and such. But yeah, what we've got in marijuana right now parallels the early development of American capitalism, where it was a state-based kind of system. And there's all sorts of great advantages to the state-based system. Aside from just keeping the big multinational players at bay, you get each state developing its own systems. Colorado's system's vastly different than Oregon's. California's going to be different. Washington's a clusterfuck. The other eastern states, it'll be interesting to see what they put together. And that sets up sort of a state versus state policy competition, especially in the bordering states. I know the effect of Oregon's policies are having an effect on Washington state, and their lawmakers going, look, we got to allow home grow, even though we don't want to. It's just, there's no way to stop. I mean, we're really starting to have that effect, and it's going to have an effect on taxation. I made the case in the first hour of Massachusetts trying to jack the tax up to 28%, which has got to make the illegal weed dealers in Massachusetts and the legal weed dealers in Maine happy as hell, because these states will compete. People will move. And marijuana has been transported across state lines for as long as there's been pot smokers in this country. That's not going to come to a stop. That's that aspect of marijuana legalization. Well, let's legalize it, but we'll legalize it in as shitty a fashion as possible so that we can point to all the hippies and say, see, legalization's a failure. We'll jack the prices up. We'll jack the taxes up. Like Washington State, I love this. Washington State jacks the taxes up to 37%, plus their state and local, which is around 8-9%, 45% overall taxation. And then the state gets all freaked out. Why? The black market's still here. There's so much black market activity still happening. Yeah, no kidding. It's the Kevin Sabet talking point, right? We can't legalize marijuana because no matter how you legalize it, you have to pay for the regulation and taxation. And that will always raise the price higher than what it is without regulation and taxation. I have an idea. How about we just deregulate it? Make it like dandelions. What's the tax on dandelions? Like if I went and picked 50,000 dandelions, put them into a bushel, had a bushel of dandelions, how much is the tax on that? And what are the regulations on dandelions? Could I sell those dandelions? Can people buy those dandelions, right? There's no real regulations on dandelions that I'm aware of. So why wouldn't we do that with weed? Why not just make weed available to anyone that wants to grow it? People can sell it, buy it, sell it. Treat it like any other agricultural crop. Treat it like tea. Treat it like kumquats. Treat it like, dare I say, tomatoes. Well, keep it out of the reach of kids. Aside from that, treat it like tomatoes. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, an interesting story from the marijuana world and one from the LSD world coming up soon. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the voice of the industry from the National Cannabis Industry Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 22 minutes to the top of the hour. It's later than I thought. Study is out now. This report on ScienceDaily.com. Marijuana use among college students on the rise following legalization. What? This just in, college kids in Oregon smoke weed. Film at 11. Oregon State University researchers compared marijuana usage among college students before and after legalization and found that usage increased at several colleges and universities across the nation, but it increased more at the Oregon University. None of the universities were identified in the study. So it's an Oregon University. The researchers are from Oregon State University. They won't say which university in Oregon. I'm betting it's U of O. I'm betting it's the Ducks. Folks, people choose to go to University of Oregon for the marijuana. Okay? That's one of the selling points of going to school in Eugene, Oregon, is the marijuana culture there. Numerous high-level college athletes, football and basketball players have confided this in friends I know and in me that was a large reason why they chose the University of Oregon was its weed culture. It's not for the rain. It's definitely not for the rain. So, big surprise. You legalize weed, college kids want to smoke it. Oh, wow. Well, this dovetails into a story that's up on the New York Daily News that asks the pertinent question, why are millennials dropping alcohol for marijuana? Gee, let's think about that one for a sec. We better call up Scooby-Doo to solve this mystery. Why are millennials dropping alcohol for marijuana? It says California 20-somethings are making the switch from alcohol to marijuana. A study released by Outco, a Southern California cannabis company with Monocle Research, shows more than 50% of Californians aged 18 to 29 are substituting cannabis for alcohol. More than half of millennials in California are substituting cannabis for alcohol. Now, the CEO of Outco, Lincoln Fish, there's a name. Lincoln Fish said, quote, "We found that for millennials, the choice between the two main recreational substances, alcohol and tobacco, has always been an easy one. Growing up with anti-tobacco messaging, the smoking rate for 18 to 29-year-olds in the U.S. has dropped by 22% over the past decade, leaving alcohol as the substance of choice. But we are already seeing a decrease in alcohol sales, which means that cannabis is poised to be the new recreational substance of choice for many millennials and beyond." The study also revealed these findings. Beer was the most popular substitution, with 34%, over a third of millennials, saying they will opt for cannabis over beer. 18% of millennials will substitute cannabis for wine, and 14% of millennials will substitute cannabis for hard alcohol. And in other generations, we find 1 in 5 Gen Xers, I think I'm a Gen Xer, 1 in 5 Gen Xers, I might not be Gen Xer, I don't know. 1 in 5 Gen Xers will substitute cannabis for alcohol, about 20%, and 8% of baby boomers, that's about what, 1 in 12-ish? Yeah. So many people are switching to cannabis from alcohol because, marijuana is safer. The New York Daily News story says the main reasons for making the switch, according to the survey of 2,000 marijuana users in the state: safety, cost, and health. With regards to safety, many express the fear of making poor decisions when drunk, including drunk driving. Cost, they say high-quality cannabis is cheaper than alcohol. And health, hangovers are more debilitating than overindulging on cannabis. Marijuana made them feel healthier and more active. Now, we know this. This is stuff that we've been talking about on this show for years now. Give people the choice. Why would you punish someone for making the choice of something safer than alcohol? We're not saying end alcohol. I like alcohol. You might like alcohol. We can use alcohol too. That's fine. But give people a choice. Give people the ability to choose. And I'll tell you, I use marijuana every day. I use alcohol sparingly. And a lot of people will make that choice because, yes, alcohol is a hard drug. It's more devastating to you when you're using it. The simple choice. So it's no surprise that millennials are switching to marijuana from alcohol. This, though, while it's good news for the public health, could be scary news for marijuana legalization and reforms. Because you're going to have alcohol companies now that recognize the threat from wide open legalization. I do believe we're past a tipping point where, the states are going to be legalizing one by one, election after election. But how legal will they be? Will home grow be available? I see the alcohol lobby gearing up to oppose home grow. At least if we can get them to have to buy their weed in a store, we get them out on the road where they might also stop out and, stop by a bar or pick up a 6-pack or something. But if they can grow it at home, they got no reason to leave the house to get their fun. They'll oppose that kind of stuff. They'll support high taxes on marijuana. Keep the price of that marijuana high so the competition price between it and alcohol is reasonable. As we continue our success in legalization, it's going to develop, it's going to cause more well-heeled, very powerful opponents to be fighting us. And it's just something to keep an eye on. I always worry when we said that, marijuana is safer than alcohol, that there would be this blowback eventually from a well-established industry that doesn't like to see its product being called dangerous. And we may be seeing that. All right. And one other story to cover in this segment. From Scientific American, science calls out Jeff Sessions on medical marijuana and the historic drug epidemic. This is 91 people a day dying in the U.S. from our drug overdoses. And Jeff Sessions calling for Congress to roll back the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment that would protect the medical marijuana states, that does protect the medical marijuana states. And in doing so, he cited the historic drug epidemic. And as we mentioned on the show, the science is not on his side on this one, because places where the U.S. has legalized medical marijuana have fewer overdose deaths. A 2016 survey from the University of Michigan published in the Journal of Pain found that chronic pain sufferers who used cannabis reported a 64% drop in opioid use, 2/3 fewer pills, as well as fewer negative side effects and better quality of life. 2014 study, Journal of the American Medical Association. Annual opioid overdose deaths were about 25% lower on average in states that allowed medical cannabis compared with those that did not. Now, this is not to say marijuana is harmless. Nothing that alters your mind and body is harmless. Nothing. You can overdose on water. Water can kill you. And marijuana can be habit forming. You can develop a dependence on it. People can have an unhealthy relationship with it. But compared to dependence on opioids, it's not even in the same ballpark. A 20-year review of studies found that more than 9 out of 10 people who try marijuana do not develop a dependence. It's about 9%. Lifetime risk, lifetime. Your whole life smoking pot, the risk that you might develop at some period, not permanently necessarily, but at some period develop an unhealthy dependence, worked out to about 9%. 32% is the dependence rate for nicotine, 23% for heroin, 17% for cocaine, 15% for alcohol, and 11% for stimulants. In other words, 1 out of 11 people become dependent on marijuana, 1 out of 9 on stimulants, about 1 out of 6 on alcohol or cocaine, about 1 out of 4 on heroin, and about 1 out of 3 on nicotine. Also, it's virtually impossible to overdose on marijuana. They say virtually impossible. I'm going to say impossible. You cannot consume enough marijuana to kill yourself. Cannot be done. Now, of course, as we know, opiates are killing people like crazy, up by 20.6%. 13,000 deaths from heroin alone. We're not even talking about oxy and fentanyl and all that, just heroin. Of course, what happens here is that people get on these opiate prescriptions from their doctors who pump out hundreds of them to people. And then when those run out and they find themselves with the Jones, that's when they turn to the heroin because it's cheaper and it's more available. Don't have to get a prescription. Don't have to go through all that hassle. And according to this story in Scientific American, they list another study published in July 2016 in Health Affairs that they found that what happened to the painkiller prescriptions after a state passed medical marijuana, a typical physician in a state with medical cannabis prescribed 1,826 fewer painkiller doses for Medicare patients because seniors instead turned to medical pot. Also, hundreds fewer doses prescribed for antidepressants, anti-nausea medications, and anti-anxiety drugs because people could swap out marijuana for those. So when Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, gave his testimony the other day and said that marijuana is legally and scientifically an illegal drug, he was only half correct. Legally, it is a Schedule I drug. But anybody trying to claim there is a scientific justification for keeping marijuana in the same prohibited category as heroin is just simply off his rocker. And it's time for us to recognize that marijuana is not a drug on par with cocaine and cocaine schedule too, but on par with heroin or LSD or PCP or ecstasy. And I can make arguments that all the rest of those drugs ought not be Schedule 1. In fact, that there should be no such thing as Schedule 1, that all drugs should be available to people who want access to them. Escalating levels of regulation based on potential harm, sure, but I don't see in the Constitution the right of the federal government to ban me from taking substances into my body. I just don't see that. Maybe it's in Article 8. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back to close things up with an LSD story. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinthgarnell III. Tonight we take a look at one of the finest works in the cannabis cinema, 1996's Half-Baked, starring David Chappelle, as interpreted by the Royal Shakespearean Cannabis Theatre Company. In this scene, Chappelle's character, Thurgood Marshall, has just admitted his addiction to cannabis to a room full of narcotics addicts. One addict, played in the film by Robert Saget, and interpreted here by the Royal Company's Sir Frederick Farrach, takes umbrage at the suggestion.
I find preposterous the notion that you, sir, may be addicted to cannabis. In times previous, I have undertaken lubricious endeavours, most revolting and unbecoming of a proper gentleman, in my servitude to the wicked powder of the coca leaf. Lo, that is an addiction whose chains would bind Hercules. At any point in history, could one identify a moment in your life so sullied by your ignominy as a cannabis slave? Methinks not! Boo this man!
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinthgarnell III.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me for A Sensible Future from Students for Sensible Drug Policy every other Tuesday here on the Marijuana Agenda. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back. Hey, quick note here on the Patreon platform. The Marijuana Agenda is now a supporter of marijuanamoment.net. So we're gonna support out to Marijuana Moment, and they're gonna support back out to us. So there's gonna be this nice little synergistic cross promotional relationship. So look for our link. You'll find it in the footer of the Marijuana Moment newsletter every day, and I think there'll be a shout out probably on tomorrow's newsletter regarding that with links back here to the Marijuana Agenda. I want to throw as much support to Tom Angel as possible. I think he's right up there as far as the people doing the best work in marijuana journalism. Definitely as far as breaking news and politics stuff, he's the guy I turn to. When it comes to policy, I turn to John Hudak. When it comes to marijuana science, scientific stuff, Paul Armentano is pretty much unbeatable. Latest studies and interpretation of them, Dr. Mitch Earlywine. We've got a really great stable of experts here on the show. So please, if you can support the Marijuana Agenda, if you can give $4.20 a month, that'd be great. If you'd like a VIP package, it's $9.99 a month, and you get extra posts, you get commercial-free downloads of each one of these segments, you get the full video replay, all sorts of extra spreadsheets and downloads that I'm going to put out there. So help out if you can, and we'll keep this thing going. All right. As we close up shop, I promised an LSD story. And this one involves one of our favorite weed people, too, O'Shea Jackson, a.k.a. Ice Cube. He is going to be portraying Doc Ellis, the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball player who pitched a no-hitter while high on LSD. If you don't know about this story, it's amazing. Doc Ellis, in one of his memoirs, talked about how he was had the day off. He had pitched a few days before, and he thought he'd had the day off, so he took some acid, and then got the news or heard in the newspaper, or a girlfriend read it, I forget the exact story, but that he was actually pitching that day. And so, tripping on acid, Doc Ellis gets up there and pitches a no-hitter. Big deal in baseball, right? And he talks about how while he was on LSD, he felt it was like kind of performance enhancing, like the strike zone became huge and everything was just kind of flowing. And I can see that happening, right? So Ice Cube is going to be playing Doc Ellis. Now, there's more to it than just the LSD game, because Doc Ellis was a very colorful character, and he was wore curlers in his hair at workout. The commissioner of baseball threw a fit about that. He had a decade-long career, played with the Pirates, Yankees, Athletics, Rangers, and Mets. He had never pitched a game sober. He had been drunk previous times and other drug addiction. So it's going to be an amazing piece, I think. And Ice Cube has been doing great work. I mean, they produced Straight Outta Compton. If you haven't seen that movie from 2015, Straight Outta Compton is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to this. The Doc Ellis story coming out from Ice Cube and his production company. It's also interesting to think about how, in a world where drugs were legal, what the effects might be. I mean, I don't think there's many athletes out there thinking they ought to be tripping before they get out there to perform in their sports. But if it were legal, wouldn't it be fun to test that stuff? Wouldn't it be great? Like, take the All-Star game, for example, right? Whatever league, right? NBA, NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer. Take these All-Star games, which they're anachronism, okay? So the reason we had all-star games in the first place, because back in the day, you'd have players in this league or players in that league, players on the West Coast, players on the East Coast, and there wasn't national coverage like there used to be. So people living in Cleveland would get to know the Cleveland players and the Philadelphia players and the Cincinnati players, but they would never see or hear or know anything about this awesome player out in LA or this awesome player in Seattle or whatever. So they put these all-star games together in the early days of these leagues to, showcase, look at all the talent we've got in this league that from this coast and that coast and the Midwest and everywhere, and make a spectacle of it to bring in more viewers and get people excited about the sport. Those days are long gone. We've got ESPN, we got SportsCenter, we got the top 10 highlights, we've got nonstop coverage of every league 24 hours a day and all the superstar highlights on instant loop replay on YouTube. There's no need for an all-star game anymore. So let's make it a little more exciting. Let's dose all the players on acid and send them out onto the field and see what happens. That I'd pay money to see. Wouldn't that be fun? NFL All-Star Game, everybody's tripping. I think this could be we could make this pay-per-view. This wouldn't even be just a throwaway broadcast on a Sunday that nobody's paying attention. We could make this pay-per-view. National Basketball Association All-Star NBA Acid Dunk Contest. Major League Baseball Home Run Acid Contest. Oh my gosh. The possibilities are endless, aren't they? But this show isn't. That's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ from Delta 9 House, and until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a fleet, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you